You're listening to My Inner Teacher with Peter Starius and Crystal Ariel. The answers you seek are within you.
Heather, thank you so much for being a guest. Welcome. This podcast, we kind of start in a very similar mode each time where we ask the guests to recall at what point in your life did you start to recognize that you were a little different. And I say that fondly and not different in a negative way, but different like there were things that your peers or your siblings were thinking of or doing, and you maybe had a different way of looking at things and a different way of doing things. And if it didn't happen as a child, maybe it happened later in life. What was it that kind of took you on this path of listening to that voice within with trust, like, oh, this is a resource to take advantage of. This is something that's embodied within me.
What a great question. I love that. I don't think I realized that I was doing it until much later, but I acted on my own volition, if that's the correct word. I think the first big thing that echoes the kind of work that I do now in the world and the way that I show up in the world now is a friend of mine in third grade said, I want to do a play for my parents' anniversary. And I want to do Annie and I want to be Annie. And I was like, great. So within a week, I had gone to another friend's mother who worked at the library. And I said, can we have the community room for auditions? And she said, yes. So then I went to my friend's mother who worked at the newspaper. And I said, can you publish these auditions for Annie in the newspaper? They'll be, Sunday. And then proceeded to welcome all these adults and families and everyone showing up at the library by handing out scripts and telling them to just go sit down. I was whatever third grade is. Peter, you might know. You've had, is it 8 or 10?
8 or 9?
Yeah, something like that. And they're all, what's going on here? So I come to find out later, my friend meant her living room. Like she wanted to do a play in the living room for her parents. And I was like, we're going to do a play. Well, why don't we just get everybody involved and do a play, for the whole town, the whole city of, 40,000 with 200,000 people around it. And it ended up creating a theater company. Some of the adults that came in said, how can we help? And then proceeded to make it so much more than I think I would have known how to do at the time. And it became a Burlington Broadway Kids for the next 20 years, right?
Fantastic.
So, and Robin was Annie. So it was just the way I always did things. So I think I was always listening to my inner guide. But there's a long journey of learning to trust that, because in third grade, no problem. Enough, getting knocked down after that through my 20s and then my 30s. Oh my God, just starting to go, what am I doing? And why do I do these things? And then really just kind of coming to terms with your inner nature. Takes a lot of practice. Yoga, of course, has been my vehicle to develop that kind of understanding with myself and my soul and my spirit, and how to move through willfully, but from that innate intelligence, So yeah, so I was pretty small.
What was that family that had the station wagon with Chevy Chase?
Vacation movie?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, Chevy Chase. I forget the name of the people, but we were kind of like that, And we almost never stayed. When we go on summer vacations, we rented what we call a caravan, I guess is what it's called. It's a tow trailer, a little camper, and we'd park it alongside the road near a beach somewhere, or in a park in Southern California on the beach. And that was our summer vacations, and we barbecued every night, and it was pretty
Every night?
Yeah,
wow.
Every night, low budget. We never went out to eat. I mean, literally, my family, my dad sold insurance door to door all the years growing up. And as an adult, I asked him, I said, Dad, what was it like knocking on, imagine someone knocking on your door. Do you want to buy life insurance? And I said, how many hits would you get? Like, how many sales would you get in a typical week? And he goes, well, I'll put it to you this way. In a typical month, I bet you I knocked on 3,000 doors, and a good month was having three commissions. So 2,997 times he was getting either get off my porch or no thank you. And it was like, how do you live like that? With that much rejection. And yet he was not a depressed guy. He was a happy guy. We just never saw him that much. So yeah,
What did he say about that?
I mean, it taught him to have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. And so he was doing other things on the side. And we focused really on using everything that we could get access to, like thrift stores. And he was a fixer. If a toy broke or the radio broke, he'd just pull it apart, put it back together again, and it was fixed. Those were the days where you could open things up and fix them. So we didn't know any different. And my grandparents owned a Greek restaurant, and so they were always bringing leftover food and groceries and stuff like that to the house on Sundays. So it was, I mean, as a kid, you just accept that this is how things are. It's not like you have anything really to compare to. And we had, I had a good childhood, I think, in looking back on it.
Now
Definitely
I'm craving
different
a
though.
gyro.
I was the middle child. I was kind of the problem child. I had my way of doing things that never really aligned with the family. So, yeah.
I would say I'm a little bit of the oddball for sure out of the whole extended family. But I'm the oldest, so Peter.
You have siblings?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. Blessed
many?
with a big family that's very close, which is really nice. Yeah. And it is interesting. You don't have anything to compare it to, as a kid, your world is so much smaller. That's why I was asking you what your dad, what did he say about having the perseverance to continue when the door is just literally slammed in his face over and over and over again?
Oh, he had all these sayings like, setbacks are opportunities,
Yes.
and, these colloquialisms that he just, I don't know where he got them from. It was before talk radio and stuff like that. So he was one of those, he was a, first generation child of immigrant families and it was, you had this survival instinct that was so strong, and failure was just an opportunity to learn how to sell better. And he did it. And I respect this about him, and because I have a little bit of it in me. You set your mind on doing something and you just keep doing it until you get better at it, because there's something in what you're doing that you're passionate about. And teaching yoga, for instance, for me, I started teaching yoga before it was fashionable for a man to be even doing yoga, like in the 70s.
It's fashionable.
Yeah. So, then this life just kind of followed me into this yoga industry. And before you knew it, I owned a studio. I owned a yoga mat company. I wrote a book, blah, blah, blah. How did I have that plan when I graduated from university? This is what I'm going to do with my life. No. And you probably didn't have that idea when you got out of college. I'm going to start a yoga festival, or did you?
Okay, so I've never had a plan. Now I'm trying to have plans. I'm trying to understand what it means to have plans, and also recognize that plans change. No, everything was always a passion, a labor of love, and born of inspiration, and just a little bit wild. It just barrel right through it. Enough things. I appreciate where this conversation started to go in talking about, failure being an opportunity, being a lesson, being a way to learn and grow and all of that. The more I think I guess I would say I was never risk averse, so the more willing that you are to just constantly put everything on the line, the more likely there's going to be tons of failures and mistakes and things that don't go right. somehow always getting back up. I'm reminded of something. Well, MC Yogi said something on your show a couple weeks ago or whenever that was about being stubborn, needing to get the lessons a few times, like you'll get kind of hit over the head on them. So hence now the planner with a little bit more risk aversion, but it's actually more focused intention that that free spirit that, you know, sees all the possibilities, get everybody in and do all the crazy things, you know. Now with that focus and knowing it's an innate nature thing feels like responsibility, right? And there was a phase in my life when I looked at responsibilities with a little bit of fear, like just burden, you know, or like a burden, because I would never promise anything and not be able to deliver. It would just make my head explode, right? So yeah, sometimes I would stay out of things and be like, oh, I can't promise that. It can't be done. I don't know if I can do it. Now, somehow, because of the mistakes, because of the bumps in the road, because of, you know, things not always going the way that you imagine them to go, there's so much more clarity ultimately. Because I think when you live like that, when you put yourself out there, whether it's your father knocking on the door over and over again, or seeing a vision and wanting to see it come to life and just doing it, you are paving the path to clarity of intention, and honing the focus just gets more and more honed when you let go. It's easier to identify where your fears rest.
Yeah.
You know, because you're always right up against them. And fear and anxiety and all of that tends to come for a lot of reasons, you know, a lot of reasons. I'm not even going to guess why everybody has anxiety or fear or depression or anything like that. But it can be, I think, alleviated by that knowing, that inner knowing of what you're supposed to be, actually. And then some sort of discipline that has helped you to identify how to be in any moment, right? So it's very interesting to be in my 50s now and look, you know, I'm not 20, you know, I'm not 30, I'm not 40. And I've looked at all those, and there's so many opportunities with each of those decades, you know, exploration, building, you know, the different layers of confidence that come with different, you know, times in your life. And this is kind of an interesting midpoint. I think, you know, to be in a place where there's more experience and wisdom gained, hopefully, from the lessons learned, and yet still so much opportunity.
Yeah.
But I feel myself settling into a role of like holding that space more myself instead of just building that space for everybody to come play and like hiding, you know, behind the computer and the program and stuff. I just took it all sorts of places. So wherever you want to go with any of that.
Well, no, I there is something that I wanted to share with you because I've thought about it since the festival this year. This was the first time I think that I've recognized, especially for your birthday celebration, you know, just being included in that little ceremony that we did to honor your birthday, that you aren't hiding. I mean, you were never hiding, but it was like you've stood up for like the first time that I'm aware of, and just really owned the fact that you're the founder director of the Sedona Yoga Festival. And it is a highly respected yoga festival in America. And it's survived the pandemic. I mean, I remember 2 days before I was getting on the plane to come to Sedona to launch my book, and you called me and said, well, actually, we're not doing it this year, you know, and how you pivoted and were able to bring it back, you know, when it was time to bring it back. And to me, that can't be easy. That's so much disappointment for people, myself included. I was so looking forward to that festival that year. And this year, it was just one of my best festival experiences I've had. And it just was, I don't know, that you are definitely growing in that position of having this festival every year. And I do want to thank you for that. It's a special event that you hold.
Hey, quick note. Peter's Inner Teacher Academy is launching soon. If this is resonating with you, head over to innerteacheracademy.com and grab a spot on the wait list. These trainings are intimate and space is limited. So if you want to be first in line, tap the link in the description below and sign up.
You can also see details about my 2025 retreats at some incredible locations around the world, like Iceland, Austria, California, and New Zealand. Attendance at these trainings will count towards in-person hours for the Inner Teacher Academy. And now let's get back to the magic.
Thank you. Yeah, it has taken a long time to get it through my thick skull that people appreciate it. And a lot of friends and colleagues and peers and other organizations have gone out of their way in these last couple of years to tell me, kind of like you just did, like, hey, you're doing something, right? And I think I just never centered myself in any of it. And now I see that as not coming from a place of ego, but coming from a place of knowing, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I mean, I did this bringing people together all my life, from the, theater company in third grade to, different events around arts and environmental sustainability, mainly in my 20s, and human rights, and then around community and neighborhood. And I would get burned out, after, even though it was still there. And it wasn't until yoga became such a significant part of my own life personally, that when I brought that together with the organizing piece, that was it. Not to say I don't get, tired after a festival every once in a while. It's a lot to put together, but I'm not ever going to feel like my energy is going the wrong place. Like, this is it's the passion and the purpose combined, the skills and the innate purpose, and then the passion for all that yoga offers and everything it's given me. And you always hear that when you ask a yoga teacher, why did you become a yoga teacher? It changed my life so much. How could I do anything but share it? Right. And I did used to teach, and I still occasionally teach. And, but this feels more like what I'm supposed to be doing, I bring a lot of people together.
You do.
Around yoga, and because everyone will find their unique, or a technique that uniquely works for them as a key to a practice or a life of yoga, right? There's thousands of techniques for a reason, and there's something really something really profound that happens when people practice in large groups, and when they converge and when they're all contributing their gifts. They're asked to, I don't know if I've done this with you a lot, Peter, because you really know who you are, but you will find with a lot of people, I ask them to sort of push their envelope a little bit. Whenever someone gives me the opportunity to answer the question, well, what does that look like? What do you want me to do? I want them to do what they're most passionate about, what they know they're here to offer. And if they're not sure, I want to give them some edges to press up against, put them in places where they might not be used to being put them in formats, ask them to talk about things they haven't explored publicly yet, but I know is in their heart, or, just, it's like everybody expanding a little bit in the comfort of this community space is really profound, and it could scale up exponentially.
Well, that's something that I really was pleasantly surprised that you are expanding, and this idea of partnering in Tahiti to create a South Pacific Sedona, which is kind of the energy of it for me, it seems like. Tell me about that. How did that come about?
It came about in a failure moment, in a do I keep doing this moment? Can I keep doing this? Bringing it back from the pandemic was not easy. It's done, and there was so much community support and love, and it's done, and I'm happy about that. But in that moment, I really was asking myself some tough questions, and I had convinced myself that, I'm a creation stage creator. I got it established, and then it's time to hand it off. And even if these other things, I had some health things, even if they weren't happening, I'd be ready to hand off the festival. And one day I was walking, and I just literally called bullshit on myself. I was like, that is not true at all. Like if my vitality, physical vitality was strong, which it is again, if it was strong at that time, I would not be getting rid of, trying to give the festival away or get someone to please take it or, and I thought, what do I want to do? Now, you've been to Sedona four times for the festival, I think, and probably other times. The land is extremely powerful. This is a place historically of ceremony and sacred practice. It's known to be powerful, and I live here, and I can say that it is. People write me every year after the festival, about their profound transformations, about the ways that it opens up their life and their world and their work for them and changes things. And how they find new ways to contribute and participate, right, in their community. And so I just had the inspiration, what if these events could happen at other power points, like other locations around the world that have a really powerful ability. And there are a lot of them, Mount Shasta and Ohio, they're all over the world. Tirta points, one of my teachers called them, like the Marma points of the earth. So I had been feeling Hawaii so strongly during this time of transition and challenge that I was having, but I never felt like just sort of bowling into Hawaii and being like, I rented the venue and I'm bringing all my people. And, there wasn't like I didn't have a connection there. I just experienced the beauty of the culture and the South Pacific. So I had this inspiration just when I called bullshit on myself. No, I am going to keep doing this. What does it look like? What if it was a network of events around the globe? I kid you not, in less than one day, out of the blue, Ronnie Chaves, who is Tahitian, and has been a presenter at Sedona Yoga Festival and had come a couple of times and presented a couple of times, wrote me an email that started with, this is going to sound completely out of the blue, but it came down like a thunderbolt. I want to do the Tahiti Yoga Festival, and I want to do it with you. She thinks she asked me to be the godmother or something like that. And
Her godmother or the godmother of the festival?
Festival. But I just got goosebumps all over my body because it was such validation. It was just such synchronicity to having really just put that idea, that vision, that concept out there, and to be immediately, and of course, coming from Polynesia also. So we agreed right away. Now, logically, from a business standpoint, one might not want to, add more events and start with like the middle of the South Pacific and one of the furthest places that you can go to in the world. The alignment was all there. So we chose to move forward with it. So it sparked this, and she had been working on doing a sort of local version of Tahiti Yoga Festival before 2020. So they had tabled that too. So it's sort of bringing that back to life. And I'm not expanding, my business to own a whole bunch more events. These are explorations in what collaboration really looks like. So we're collaborating. Like there's a group there, and then I have, everything I've created over here over the last 12, 13, 15 years, 30 years. And I'm bringing that to the table and helping produce it. And we're co-directing. And I'm hoping it's the first of many. I'm meeting people right now. People always want to do this. I don't know whether we make it look easy. We should dispel that myth. It's not easy, but people do, and I'm like, wow, if I can help bring more, more people. So right now what it looks like is, who's got
Is that what that noise has been? It's raining.
That's a
Moving his
thunderstorm.
furniture. That's what they say.
Yeah. So right now it looks like these two events, and then there'll be additional. But one thing that I really haven't shared with anybody yet is
this a world exclusive right now that you're going to share?
Yes, you're getting the exclusive. Is that once these this network is established around the world, I would love for us to do something all at the same time.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be special?
There's another really important piece to it, which is the nature piece. So I'm talking about these PowerPoints, but wherever there is sacred land, there are wisdom keepers and guardians of that land. And yoga is this indigenous wisdom of India that's been adopted all over the world, for better or for worse. It's had it's reached the four corners of the earth. Acharya Shunya says that her father said, there are three things in this world that are for everyone. And it's pizza, Levi's jeans, and yoga. So I think that the people who have adopted this yogic wisdom are ultimately the ones that are most primed and prepared already to benefit from indigenous wisdom. And the connection with nature, when we have a deep practice of yoga and we begin to understand energy and the source of our thoughts and the flow of life itself and how it moves through the body, it's almost inevitable that you're going to see that in the world around you, in the trees that we share the breath with, in the wind, in the way that everything lives, life itself everywhere, right? So we are that intelligence. We are that life force. We're that prana. We're that shakti. So those who've been practicing yoga are ready, I think, and almost, I want to encourage this. I want to encourage this connection with the people who have been guarding, protecting the land and have held really other longstanding wisdoms. So I've done that here in Sedona. I've invited always, local Indigenous teachers to welcome us for land acknowledgements, to teach, right? But this global piece looks a little bigger because I think I've already said it, but I think if we can really bring people who already have the foundation laid to begin to understand these practices and let these practices that sit also all over the globe, and that connection to nature and that connection to additional wisdom flourish and begin to affect the minds and the hearts and the intentions and the practices of the people who are exposed to it, we can even further benefit toward the potential for peace, and compassion and cooperation and also perhaps with more rigorous action toward protecting, the life on the planet as well.
I've had this evolution through, the last 20 years of hosting retreats and hosting trainings. And I think it's more the proliferation of so many yoga retreats now and so many things that where it's hard to, I would imagine in the kind of yoga marketplace, it's really hard to distinguish what a good, worthwhile yoga retreat is these days. And I even was, thinking about this idea, the word retreat being a problem in a way, because it's kind of lost its meaning a little bit. If you can go to retreat 52 weeks a year, if you want. And it's ironic that as you talked just now, that I've come to call my retreats nature and wellness retreats. I didn't even mention the word yoga anymore, in the title anyway, because there's this quality of nature that is so essential to include in your yoga practice, and not just what's outside, but also what's inside. And so that word nature has just kind of landed at the right time for me. And then wellness is balance. And so that's also this piece. So I think that movement is, you're going to see more of this idea and you're just at the forefront of it. Your concept of these PowerPoints around the globe. I look for retreats in these PowerPoints, New Zealand, Austria, Iceland, Northern California, and all of them have this almost wild nature still intact. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of Sedona Yoga Festival, as you know, and it's because I appreciate your stamina to keep doing it, but also the expansion and creativity that you seem to somehow bring together every year in just magical ways and profound ways as well.
Thank you. I mean, the programming is unique. I remember back in 2016, I thought about changing the name from Yoga Festival to Yoga Conference or Consciousness Evolution Conference. And in 2016, I thought, oh no, it's too late. You know, everybody's heard of Sedona Yoga. Nobody had heard of Sedona Yoga Festival in 2016. But I'm having that question again right now because I've always brought complementary practices. Sedona has a lot of metaphysical practitioners. So there's Reiki, there's psychics, there's, working with crystals, there's working with quantum vibrations, there's working with sacred geometry. So many of these things, so many of these metaphysical teachers actually that I've met and worked with over the years, I will say what you're actually doing yoga, a lot of them. These wisdoms, they're not far from each other.
That's
they're
right.
just so, but it is yoga right? So, and I've had the same sense, interesting, that you're saying nature and wellness. I'm sure that's going to Google rank you too, Peter, because there's kind of a global movement toward wellness that's going right up the chain. I think I was on an airplane and saw one of the major hotel brands were like, for your wellness stay. It's very like people are talking about wellness. And it kind of reminds me when 15 years ago, and there were little fake mala beads and stuff in like the fast fashion mall stores, right? And I thought, okay, well, this is, I mean, it's a good thing maybe because it means like it's really getting around, right? We don't have to buy after a while, it started to get a little loose, but I think kind of like yoga washing, greenwashing, wellness washing, but it is a good thing that the word wellness is becoming so important in everybody's lexicon, even up the chain for corporations where their bottom line really is people are not the first bottom line item. It's always money, right? So, and that's their by law responsibility to their, so yeah, the nature piece is huge. And the beyond yoga piece is huge too, because I think, like you started so long ago, like you said, before it was fashionable, before there were a lot of retreats. And so these are people just being exposed we're babies, and now I can say in the West, the studio model being what it is and all the changes since the pandemic, no matter what has happened, more people than ever have practiced, and many, many, many of them have gotten to a point of their practice where there's no way it's just about asana anymore.
That's right.
Because it's gone on for so long, because of all the retreats available, because of the conferences that were created, because of the studios, because of the internet, because of all the, so we're in a place now where I think there's a huge audience that's ready to, if they're not already, and many of them are already, but taking it all to the next level, to life, to, life itself. What does it mean? Are you living yoga? Like, where is it really embodied? Is it really embedded? Is it really showing up? And how does it show up in nature? And how does it show up in complementary practices? How does it show up in business, in relationships? So, I never assume that some idea I've had is just only mine and I got it first and I better, trademark and all that. I can feel this growing. It's just being open to listening and tapping in, back to sort of the topic of your podcast in general, to being able to discern when something's coming through from a place of just, this is the action. This is the act.
It's come through crystal clear. I keep using that word, crystal, and I don't know if it's because you're in my life now that crystal is so clear for me, but the inner teacher is, I know, the inner teacher is literally I see it as this next phase where the disillusionment with gurus that has, been in the news a lot, and especially Western gurus, but also Eastern gurus, where during the pandemic years, there was other aspects of our culture and societies that these institutions that we put trust in, it was fractured a little bit. That trust was tested, and in many cases, it failed miserably. And with the paradox, this is one thing that I've noticed through all the study I've done with yoga. Yoga, like many creative art, is filled with paradox. And why? Why is paradox? Why can't it just be black and white? Why can't it just be, okay, do this asana and this is what you're going to get, and do this sequence and this is what you're going to get? It doesn't work that way. And so why is, the different styles of yoga, the different, even Ayurveda, the different schools of Ayurveda have paradox. They have different qualities, that relies on literally the intuition of the practitioner, the Ayurvedic practitioner, to diagnose. And astrology is helpful. And, in yoga, this paradox, what is it asking of us as teachers and as students? And it is ultimately to turn inward, and inward is where this inner teacher resides, this inner voice, this inner calling, intuition, whatever word that is comfortable for you to use. If yoga is not moving, if the instruction of yoga is not moving each student towards that awareness, then I would say it's just exercise. And we all need exercise, but there's a lot of people that have been exercising for the last 20 years and they're getting bored, or they're getting like, okay, I don't need to learn a sun salutation again. I've already done it 10,000 times. What's next? What is next? That's what the Inner Teacher Academy is about. It's like, what's next is turn inward. Here are the practices that assist, that guide you towards that center, and will take you to a point. And then that point is where you decide, where you take self-authority and you step into the labyrinth. And the labyrinth is this one-way path to the center. I think, I don't know, have I been on the forefront of trends in yoga? Yeah, a little bit. And this is the next one for me, that and this idea of grounding, earthing. That both of those things are, to me, the next evolution of this industry in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the paradox. So like everything that you said there has a paradox in it. The fall of these teachers that people look to and put their faith in, starting 15 years ago, more or less, as far as this big round we've experienced in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Can paradoxically be the greatest gift all those gurus gave us, And then the responsibility of the teacher to help people look within, and that studio model and that retreat model has a paradox in it too, because I'm praying, begging, hoping, wishing, intending that teachers' number one goal is to not see their student very often, because that student gets up and can have their own practice, which will also have a paradox. You can say you do this asana and you will get this outcome. You can prescribe asana. You can prescribe Ayurveda. You can prescribe pranayama in ways where we know enough about the body. But then you let the student go on their own and they're doing it just like that until they discover that when they flip it, the effect is, 10x, right? But they wouldn't have known that if they weren't sitting on their own grounded mat alone, in their own deep practice, listening to their own wisdom that's come from all the practice they've done, all the opportunities they've had to learn from people who learned from people who learned from people, and integrate that into their own being, There's a well-known yoga teacher that I've never met who I just keep sort of noticing, and I'm hoping to invite to the festival. But something they mentioned recently was like, I don't do, that style anymore. I do something else, and it is what it is. Whatever, just come if you want to check it out. Not, I've trademarked it, not like, my new style instead of being Ashtanga is, my last name with the TM next to it or whatever. And there's, we live in a world where you want to kind of put your mark on things. I understand that. So other people aren't, whatever. But the seeing teachers who've been practicing and teaching for 40, 50 years say, I'm evolving, my practice is evolving for me. And to know that everything they did before was absolutely perfect and right too, because the reason it all evolves, even though yoga stays the same, the reason we all evolve through with the practice is there's something for you at every stage of your life and at every stage of your practice, So there's paradoxes all over the place. And I love that you've identified that. It's so true. And it's, there is a readiness. There are people who are ready. There are people already, ahead of the game on everything that we're talking about, and people that haven't even thought about what we're talking about who might be listening right now with just, when do you surrender to the fact that you actually know what to do?
Yeah, that's the big word, isn't it? Surrender. And then what's on the other side of surrender? And that precipice, that void, in other words, is all the research I've done. That void is what's necessary for the next step. It kind of sets you up to let something, I was going to say bigger, but it's not even bigger, something more aligned, let's say, for the next phase of your life. To me, that's that, when does your groove become a rut kind of idea? Like we all get that high off the first 5 or 6 years of a yoga practice, some people 10 years of a yoga practice. And then it gets so routine that there's this plateau. And that plateau is where a lot of people give it up and start doing Zumba or, whatever the next trend is. But it's in those moments of plateau of where what was serving in the past is no longer serving with the same vitality. Those are the moments to actually look deeper or inward, see what shows up, be patient, see what shows up. And that pattern has happened so many times in my life where things just reach a plateau. And then instead of quitting, I have this lineage of teachers behind me that have taken these plateaus and then innovated. And it goes back 4 generations of teachers, of innovators, Krishnamacharya, Iyengar, Shandor, now me. We've all taken what we've learned and moved it into a more alignment with the individual's experience as it should be. And then it's a living art, this practice. And that's what I'm trying to teach. It's not easy to teach that. And especially if you start teaching it to first-time beginners. And my experience with that is that sometimes it's easier to teach this inner awareness to beginners because they don't have a head full of ideas of what yoga is supposed to be.
Really?
And that has turned out to be a bonus for what we're trying to do with the academy. Like the teaching of teachers is not really part of our mission. We're teaching people how to awaken to their inner teacher, and that applies to a beginner as well as a teacher or experienced practitioner. It's that inward journey that we're supporting. And if you're those of you that are out in the audience right now, if you're a teacher that's been teaching for 20 years and this idea of surrender, letting this focus switch a little bit and turn inward. And for the beginner, this starting the journey where it just seems so daunting how much information is in yoga, it can be very simple in the beginning. The practice can be very simple. Learn how to breathe, learn how to use gravity, and learn how to surrender. You learn those 3 things, and it gives you a foundation for any style of yoga that you take. take on.
You know, that piece about getting, in a rut, right? Or moving on to talk about the festival a little bit, if that's okay. One of the reasons I think that it's so valuable for people to come to a conference format is because they can, it gets you out of your rut. First of all, you're traveling, you're leaving town. People come from all over the world, for Sedona and hopefully for Tahiti too. But I program a lot of, I love having you there, Peter. People are always just so happy with your classes. Very impressed. I learned so much. I went so deep. It was so straightforward and simple and beautiful, right? So the opportunity needs to exist in the programming for people to have an experience of yoga in a way that very experienced teachers can provide and transmit, and also to have the opportunity to try a whole bunch of different things and different styles through different lenses. Because, I put this application process out there because I meet all these amazing people I never would have met. And it's not, I texted my friend Heather and made an introduction, and then I'm getting messages on Instagram and Facebook and emails and all that kind of stuff. This is a very formal, introduce yourself, tell us who your teachers are, tell us what you teach, how you teach, why you teach, what you would love to teach at this festival. I've met so many extraordinary people out there doing amazing work with yoga, in so many fields, so many formats, and so many styles. So, I can't speak to other festivals. I haven't really been to a lot of other yoga festivals. I swung by a couple. I saw you at one, Peter, and that's fun. And it's very fun. It's really nice to be on the receiving end. But, I only know what I do. And that is just to try to make the opportunities for people to actually follow their inner guide as to what their schedule should look like, because there's 150, 200 options, on the program throughout the weekend. So if you follow your own heart, or Sedona trips you up and sends you wherever you're really supposed to be anyway, it's got that vortex energy, that power. So, but that's a good way. It's a good way to figure out where you're going with it and to revitalize some pieces you may not have even realized you're not working with, when it comes to yoga. Yeah.
Yeah. Crystal, you've been awfully quiet.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been quiet.
Were
Just
you
listening.
muting the thunderstorm?
I was muting the thunderstorm. It was getting pretty crazy over here. Well, I'll ask this one question. You mentioned in the beginning, and you mentioned a few times throughout, that knowing who you are releases anxiety, and coming from a place of knowing. But that knowing, at least in my experience, is a journey in and of itself. Like, some people are still figuring out what they know, or how to tap into, they're in this place of, I have no idea. I haven't got a clue. So how did you tap into your knowing?
That's a great question. And I think one of the most important things is to understand that purpose does not always need to be work. That when people, for me, it is. So, I just wanted to make sure before I said that, right? And it's not just work, but my work and my life are the same for me. So I wanted to say that as a pre-qualifier, because I don't want it to come out sounding like, and then when you know what you're meant to do in the world, and, you've got your skills and your purpose and your passion and your work, right? But that you're not mistaken. It's a long process, and it requires a commitment to reflection. It requires a certain level of self-awareness, which yoga really helped me to cultivate. And I think helps many to cultivate just through the practices, right? So that self-awareness, suddenly you're an asshole about, can I say that on here?
Yeah, of course.
About something. And if you don't then see that something's misaligned, that something's coming from a pattern, or a tendency or a deeply embedded, wound or uh, condition that you have, then and you just skip over it, well, then you're just going to keep doing that. And so I think the indicator, not to give anyone advice on how to know yourself, but self-reflection and awareness, um, and shining a light on those dark spots that show up for you is pretty essential. But the knowing, it takes time in this. If you continue to make that a commitment, you will start to also be able to hear. So I did this. I have to figure out how to put this into words. Such a great question. I was really interested am interested in Buddhism very much. And for about a year, I did this particular vow. I had done a number of vows, and one of them was don't take anything that isn't offered, right? So there was this place I used to help out, and they had like a moose, a wooden moose, where if you picked up its tail, it pooped out peanut M&Ms. It was a candy dispenser. And I don't eat junk food, but I really liked them. And I would always have them. And there was a whole summer where I could just take the peanut M&Ms, unless someone said, would you like some peanut M&Ms? And then I would say yes. And it didn't happen all summer long. And I watched my mind and the frustration, or sometimes, just all the things that would come up, that the things I wanted in the world weren't just being offered to me, right? It's kind of a strange way to put it, but the more you remove yourself from your tendencies and your conditioning, in my experience, the more you can hear what's actually going on, right? So part of practicing, these vows was the karmic aspect and the clear conscience, because basically if you don't ever tell a white lie, or you don't ever, break these sort of simple rules for being, then you're walking around with a clear conscience. And when you're walking around with a clear conscience, you can hear your conscience, your consciousness expressing itself. So I don't think it's a matter of I know myself, therefore I am this all of my life. It is I have a relationship with the life force that expresses through me and the type of channel I'm supposed to be. And therefore, I trust myself to take the right step in any given moment, regardless what life puts in front of me.
Yeah. You
can leave your things, but like maybe next year yoga conferences won't even be a thing. Maybe like the whole world could change in a heartbeat. Does that mean I'm lost? I no longer know myself. I was mistaken. My purpose was, misaligned. No, it means I am going to have to go, okay, so what do I do now? And trust that I've cultivated that. I don't want to other myself, but the relationship does feel like the right word.
I don't know that much about Buddhism. I've dabbled when I was younger, but it was never, I was never called to like take it further than just an awareness of the philosophy. But what I do remember is that prayer is not a thing in Buddhism. Is that correct? Is there prayer in Buddhism?
Well, only so much as there's prayer in yoga. I mean, there's mantras.
Mantras.
Yeah, there's mantras. There's chanting.
Okay. It's
maybe,
not like I've always
to-
thought of Buddhism as kind of a non-religion philosophy. Is that an accurate kind of statement?
I'm not going to claim to be an expert.
Okay.
However, I would say that there's the the Theravada, Mahayana, and then the tantric path. And so just like in yoga, there's the foundational level, there's kind of the middle way. And it's very much, there are deities in both traditions. And it just depends on which lens you're looking at the deities through. There's I don't want to say elementary, there's a lens where the deities are other, and so this all gets into duality and non-duality and all the different schools of yoga and all I would say Buddhism, you'll find is similar. There's so many different schools of it. I was particularly inclined to study with Tibetan Buddhism myself, which has some shamanism and many elements of yoga as well. So, but I'm not the expert.
No,
Ask me about
this is
conferences.
this is like conversational for me, that this quality of prayer, I grew up Catholic, so prayer was, you did that every night when you went to bed, and you did it at meals, and there were these rituals that revolved around prayer, some request or it was an ask, like, help me be more open to whatever, or bring blessings, whatever the prayer was. I went through those things as a child. And I think the experiences that I had as a child created some problems for me later in life. And there was a Catholic priest that I met as an adult who helped heal that for me. And it was a beautiful experience. The trauma, let's say, of growing up in a Catholic school and growing up at a Catholic church. The prayer thing for me has always felt a little, I didn't know how to pray, I think, what it was. And instead of praying for what I want, it was more about acknowledging a divine spirit that we all possess. This is what I believe now, is that this divine spirit that we all possess has an intelligence that is waiting, in a way, for relationship. And for me, this commitment is to having a deeper relationship with this divine intelligence, wherever it sources. I'm still a little fuzzy on the source, but I have a sense that it exists. Again, this paradox. And so every now and then this topic comes up, and I'm just reading into some of the things that you're saying. And I was curious on just a personal level, Heather. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No. I don't claim to know. But, one of the things that I noticed in the types of practices I was able to do that can also be found in yoga is the quality of bringing emotion and reverence into the practice, particularly and frequently the emotion of gratitude, right? So, or compassion, so many of the practices taking away the suffering of others and taking it on, right? There's a really powerful shift that happens when we can work in that emotional space to recognize it and let it pass through, but also cultivate, the highest that humanity can offer, really, which is gratitude and compassion and love. So, that's the type of prayer and reverence. And I think reverence more so than devotion or subservience, that may be found in some more duality religions around the world. And, speaking of which, it's very interesting because almost every religion around the world has some mystical side to it.
Traditions.
It's come to my attention only recently, surprisingly, that there are people who think that yoga is bad, demonic, a betrayal, dangerous, and are warning their friends, to not fall for the tricks of the devil or things like that. And those people who say those things, I know they mean well because they also have a love for their God. But I think the difference that goes on between a lot of the organized religion and what you find in yoga and Buddhism and other mystical practices is the lack of separation between the God energy and the student or practitioner or devotee of that energy. Because if you see it within yourself and you come to know it, and you see it within every tree and plant and ocean and every other human being you come across, it's kind of hard to put a God somewhere else that you're supposed to answer to as being separate instead of it all just being one thing. You know, in yoga, we say you're not, you know, we're each unique expressions of the one whole, really for the purpose of experiencing itself.
That's
So, yeah.
so well said. So well said. And especially in these times.
I think that's a good place to stop
I
because we
agree.
just opened Pandora's box at the last minute, but we could like do another episode.
Yes, for sure. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. I didn't realize I'm not watching the clock. So, what a beautiful conversation to get lost in.
Yes, I
Yes.
agree. It is kind of, it's like those series that end where we're not sure how it all ends. This would be a great topic to pick up if the opportunity arises.
We could end with a prayer, so to speak. We could say, you know, my prayer my prayer is that all of these unique expressions of the whole that are all over the world in many forms, human, animal, and living, can somehow feel more connected to one another. I think that
Boy, wouldn't that
nice.
be heaven?
on earth.
Thank you for the prayer, Heather.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you.
That's it for this episode. Be well and stay open to the teacher within. If you've enjoyed our time together, follow or subscribe and stay tuned for upcoming chats you don't want to miss.